Please join me in welcoming Dr. Adrienne Johnson-Williams of Lemoyne-Owen College.
Good evening. I'm going to go off script because I have a script here, but I want to say an additional congratulations to Kayla. I didn't read comic books as a kid. Everything I know about superheroes, I learned from TV and movies. It probably wouldn't surprise you to know that Wonder Woman was my superhero of choice. Anybody who's ever seen me give a talk or anything has seen me do this. Thanks to Marvel and DC Comics coming to Netflix and the big screen, I've learned a lot more about the vastness of those universes and the powers and abilities characters possess. Regardless, Wonder Woman still came out on top until I met the Dora Milaje of Wakanda. In addition to them being based on real women warriors from Dahomey, present-day Benin, an army of the fiercest black women with shaved heads, armed with will, skill, determination, and vibranium weapons is way more my speed. In Eloquent Rage, a black feminist discovers her superpower. Dr. Brittney Cooper describes her slow and rocky pathway to feminism and her complex relationship with white women. Reading Eloquent Rage was like having a conversation. I could hear the echoes of black girls and women I've known across the years. I felt seen and heard. I was grateful. When I learned, I didn't watch the US Open, but when I learned how Serena received that game penalty at the US Open, Dr. Cooper's writing immediately came to mind when tears came to my eyes. In Eloquent Rage, she describes Serena's play as eloquent rage personified. She also wrote, "Her victories belong to all of us, even though she's done all the work." And conversely, from my perspective, her losses also belong to all of us, along with assaults on her integrity and any unfair treatment she receives. That moment brought to mind all the black women warriors I know and love who are penalized for regularly standing up for themselves and others, especially those in Memphis. Dr. Zandria Robinson. Oh, yes. Wendy Thomas. Commissioner Tammy Sawyer. Jayani Webster. And Shahida Jones. And these are just a few of the women. Like Serena, they are human, with will, skill, determination, and eloquent rage. It turns out that's a superpower too. Dr. Brittney Cooper, and you all have the bio, but I'm gonna read this part anyway, did her undergraduate study at Howard University, a historically black university, and graduated with the highest honors. She earned her master's and her doctorate from Emory's Graduate Institute. She's authored 2 books. I pre-ordered Beyond Respectability, The Intellectual Thought of Race Women, and of course, Eloquent Rage. She also co-authored and edited the Crunk Feminist Collection. She's written numerous articles on black feminist history and hip hop. Her Salon.com essay, "I Could Have Been Sandra Bland," echoes in my soul because, like Dr. Cooper, I've said that very same thing repeatedly as I've tried unsuccessfully to process that encounter and ultimately Sandra's death. You may have seen her work online, you may have seen her on MSNBC or PBS, or heard her on NPR. And if you aren't familiar with her or her work, congratulations. I almost envy you the newness of this experience. I am thrilled to welcome her to Memphis It is with tremendous pride that I introduce a star in the Black feminist universe of superheroes, Dr. Brittney Cooper.
Good evening, everybody. Or like I like to say, what's up? So, I want y'all to know that I was raised right, and I typically don't give talks of this nature from a laptop. So I'm not trying to disrespect you. But it has been a whole journey to get here today. My devices have not been cooperating, so we're going to make it do what it do, if you'll permit me this one liberty. First, I want to just say that I am massively thankful for the warm hospitality of every single person that I have met today. Thank you for making me feel welcome. And look, I'm a Southern girl, so I always feel welcome in the South. I roll into the South like I belong here. But the belonging has been intensified, and so I'm glad to be with you, with you, my people, who are on the front lines of struggling to make sure that we have the opportunity to create families on our own terms, in our own time, and with the resources that we need for them to thrive. Thank you, Dr. Adrian, for that lovely introduction. You know, I mean, I'm trying to get my superpowers together, so I'll try to see what we can do tonight. So let me begin. In December 2017, a few days after my 37th birthday, I happened upon a story at NPR ProPublica, which I'm sure many of you have seen, about the increasingly and scarily high rates of maternal and infant mortality in Black communities. The story profiled a Black woman doctor from Atlanta, an epidemiologist who had spent her career studying the effects of childhood stress and trauma on Black people. At 36, having overcome a host of health challenges herself, Dr. Shaylin Irving found herself pregnant and eagerly looked forward to the birth of her daughter. About 3 weeks after she gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Dr. Irving began experiencing complications. She did all the things that feminists tell you to do. She had a crew of homegirls that she stayed in touch with. Her mama came to help. She had a doula who checked in on her. She called her doctor. She advocated for herself. Somehow, she still didn't make it. And I was devastated, because when I read Dr. Irving's story, I thought this could be me or any one of my homegirls, overachieving Black girls with lots of stress that shows up in unhealthy ways. And I'm not shaming fat girls. I'm very proud to be a fat girl, but I recognize that sometimes this is some of the ways that the stress shows up, right? And so Dr. Irving had done everything she could, and still it hadn't worked out. She had tried to be an advocate to help us understand stress and trauma, and still it didn't work out. Reflecting on her story as I was preparing this talk, I was very thankful to hear about the work of some radical Black women doulas that you have here in Memphis, Dr. Nakia Grayson, Maya Janelle Peak, and Terry Lee Johnson. And I'm sure there are more, but it feels really important to thank the sisters who are on the front lines doing this work. So I was devastated about Dr. Irving's story. I didn't know her, but I called one of my homegirls, distraught. And I sat on the phone and I cried because I was counting the cost of what it means to be an overachieving Black girl from a working class background. In my new book, Eloquent Rage, one of the things I have been most concerned about is the intimate consequences of being an intersectional subject. See, it's fine to get in boardrooms and classrooms and teach about intersectionality and talk about it, but part of the thing that you should all know is those who are most vulnerable at the intersections of race and class and gender and sexuality are going home and living those consequences. It's not purely academic. It's not purely political. We live those consequences in an embodied way. And so what I thought about is that there are at least two narratives that plague working class black girls, particularly working class black girls who were coming of age in the Deep South in the 1990s, which is when I came of age. One narrative, the one that is the most stereotypical narrative that might be familiar, is a story about fast-tailed girls, as they like to call them in black communities. Y'all know how black folks can be, and I love black people. Don't come for black people. But I'm gonna tell the truth though. Okay. So, we talk about fast-tailed girls, right? Who have sex before good Christian evangelicals deem it proper for them to do so. And sometimes these girls end up pregnant. Sometimes they're not even having sex. They've just been branded as something that they're not, merely for being human, but that's the side story. So they end up being pregnant, and the narrative goes that these irresponsible black fast-tailed girls are saddling our communities and our families and the state, the government, with babies that they can't support. And so we grow up with levels of disdain for these women, and that level of disdain shapes your life, whether you are a girl who decides to parent while young or you are a girl who doesn't. The other narrative is one that's more endemic to my life. And that narrative is the one that gets ascribed to the quote-unquote good girls. Those of us who are so afraid of fucking up that we treat sex like the plague. We revel in being respectable and chaste outwardly, and we get meaning and definition for what it means to be women by talking about how we're not like them. So we, the quote-unquote good girls, internalize the structural shaming of black motherhood such that for us, we kept on delaying our prospects until it was the right time, because that's what you hear. Wait till the right time to have a baby. But anybody with children knows that there really is no perfect time to have them, right? There are better or worse times, but certainly no perfect time. But for those of us who delay motherhood, what we also do in the interim is we accrete more and more decades of stress from racist and sexist trauma. So no, I didn't have a baby, but I just went along and got degrees. And look, all of it takes a toll on your body. Babies do. Dealing with racist white people who don't want you to get the degrees, that does too, right? So I had this narrative because I'm the child of a single-teen mom. If you've read Eloquent Rage, or if you want to read it, I tell my mom's story as a young woman who had me at 18, and while she was pregnant with me, a former intimate partner of my mother's shot her. Jealous about her moving on with her life, shot her and shot my father. And so my mother was then highly encouraged to not carry her pregnancy to term. She did. I'm here. Yay. So, the child of a single-teen mom, I was determined that my mother's story around mothering would not be my own, though my mom is an awesome mom, and I like to think I'm a pretty awesome daughter. So I began in that moment at the nexus of these two narratives, a narrative about what good girls could be, and a narrative about trying to have more than what my mother had because she chose to have me. I began to worship at what I like to call the neoliberal altar of good choices. There is a danger when we make it seem like the narrative is only ever a narrative about good choices. We shame women, particularly women of color, who are in need of robust and expansive reproductive choices for making bad ones, right? So your need to have some options on the table happens in this narrative of shame. Well, why are you in this position? Well, what did you do wrong? Well, you need to make better choices. When you're a poor woman, there is seemingly no good choice that you can make about having a family. That's the real rub. We don't actually think that poor women of color should get to start families. That's the societal narrative. I know that everybody in this room says we don't believe that, but we do. You actually do. Because one of the things I've come to recognize is there's a difference between the political work we do sometimes and the dreams we have for the people we love. Right? So look, I'm going to fight tooth and nail for every sister to have the choices she needs. But when I'm trying to think about the kids in my own family, I'm like, well, baby, you don't need to do that. Like, do a different thing. And so part of the reason I'm bringing that up is not to call you out, but rather to say all of us worship at the altar of good choices. And we treat poor women or women who don't yet have particular kinds of resources, we still treat being middle class as the holy grail of being able to start a family. And so we still see this work as a stopgap measure. So we want resources to be available to poor women, but we don't want the folks that we love to ever be in this position. And to me, that slippage is a thing that we got to wrestle with. Are we really saying that we only think you should be able to have the family you want when you're middle class? When you have degrees? When you have your heterosexual romantic fantasy? You got a dude, a house, a good job, a good car. Now you can have a baby. So that's what we tell women. We say that seemingly, if you're poor, anytime you choose to have a family and you're poor, we say that's never a good choice. Or we say that you're immoral for choosing to terminate a pregnancy or to parent on different terms. So the gospel of good choices, I think, is one of the trickiest weapons used against women. But it is also used against all people who mother in the reproductive justice struggle, right? And I want to be clear about that because, one of the things we've got to do, and you've made a good start tonight in honoring Ms. Gore, and you are absolutely worthy, sis, of every honor, so thank you for your work. But we got to get an even more robust analysis about how we think about reproduction, about who gets to do it, about who needs services. And so I want to do my best to not be so cis-centered in my approach. It's a thing that I'm trying to grow in. And I always like to tell folks, like, we can be in process. We don't have to have it all figured out. What we have to do is be committed, right? So for those of us who are making quote-unquote good choices, who are told that in doing so, we will get the keys to the kingdom. So I believed it. I was like, nope, I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to do everything perfect. I'm going to get all these straight A's. I'm going to get all these degrees. And then the world will open up for me and I will have all the choices, right? So 35, found me unmarried, no property, having not yet procured tenure at my quote-unquote good job. And then, to add insult to injury, I found out I had fibroids. Now, that's not a story I need to tell because any number of black women in this room can tell you that story about fibroids. But I was left to grapple with the consequences of all my good-ass choices. I was left to grapple with the fundamental injustice of it all. And I began to wonder whether my friends and classmates who had had their babies younger had actually had a bit more sense than I did. They had done it under less ideal conditions, but maybe they had won in the end because they have families to come home to. Now, having done a bit of armchair therapy on myself, I know that the language of winners and losers is a problem, so I got it. But what I'm suggesting is that the language of good-ass choices is wholly insufficient for the political realities we are facing. What I am really suggesting is that the language of reproductive choice is insufficient. We're not trying to just give people better choices. That's actually not the goal. Because if we do that, if that's our biggest aspiration is to give people better choices, then all we're doing is worshiping at the altar of good-ass choices. We are engaged in the work of justice, not the work of determining people's choices. These things are different. I know that we're all watching the horror show that is the Trump presidency, and this week's episode is Kavanaugh might be confirmed, and where the fuck will we be? I know I'm in the good Bible Belt South, and I'm a cusser. I'm a cusser and a Jesus lover. You might get all of that in this talk. All right, just wanted to make that clear. So, Kavanaugh might be confirmed, and we will surely, if he is confirmed, experience the dissolution of Roe a mere 45 years after having had access to it, and that access not being without a great deal of assault in the ensuing decades. And so to me, that means that in these days, whereas we like to say in hip-hop community, stakes is high, right? Stakes is high. Getting clarity about the work we are doing and what we are fighting for, and getting clarity more to the point about how we fight, becomes incredibly important. So I want to be unequivocal in saying, if you haven't already figured it out, that my framework and understanding of this work is rooted in reproductive justice. My appreciation for Planned Parenthood being on the front lines of reproductive care and choice work is rooted in my aspirational sense that we all know that stopping at choice is not the goal. This work, again, is about justice, and in that I mean it is about a fundamental reimagining of what is possible when we allow women and all people with the capacity and interest in reproducing to control their own life chances. I have occasion in my life these days to hang out with lots of young, passionate activists. Now, a few short years ago, I was among the young, but they tell me that I need to age gracefully, something about not trusting anybody over 30 or something. So I'm trying, but not without a considerable amount of feelings. I feel young and fly. I'm young and fly. And so when young people are like, you know, auntie or whatever the fuck they say, and I'm like, I have feelings about that, but alas, I'm taking notes. So one of the slogans that shapes this moment of movement building with young folks is, they say, my feminism will be intersectional or it will be nothing at all, right? I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Intersectionality has become something of a buzzword, with lots of organizations thinking that they do it, while the results suggest that they really don't actually do it. So let me say that intersectionality is not synonymous with diversity. We aren't intersectional for the purpose of being diverse. We are intersectional for the purpose of justice. There is a theme here: justice, justice, justice. Okay. More pointedly, you aren't intersectional simply because you include some strategic pops of color in your organization. And even more pointedly than that, because intersectionality is a project that makes visible the operations of power in service of equipping us to do a better job at leading more justly, I would argue that your organization is not intersectional if it does not share power, recognition, and resources with a diverse pool of leadership. Now let me talk about what that means. One of the challenges of this political moment is the long-standing and contentious relationship between white and black women, very particularly. White and women of color, yes, but the urtext of that struggle is like white women and black women, right? And it's a struggle over what feminist solidarity really means. So it might be a hard truth for you to hear, but it feels really important to say to white women in this room and at this time that the truest test of your feminist commitment to anti-racism has to do with how you respond to women of color in leadership. And not just women of color, but black women very particularly. Far too often, now y'all read Eloquent Rage, y'all knew I was gonna do this. It's gonna be okay. We all together, okay. That's the only salve I got, okay. So, far too often, white women treat the category of womanhood as a unifying marker. Not a week goes by that a white woman doesn't tweet me and say, why are you being divisive? Why are you making this about race? Aren't we all women? No. My womanhood ain't like your womanhood, right? So typically white women are saying things like that. And if they're not saying it, they're like somewhere hoping and wishing. We don't understand why they're so angry and divisive and like why this is such a problem. And black women are somewhere working and giving like all kinds of side eye at white girls who don't get it, And so part of why they're side-eyeing you white ladies is because they're asking this question. You say that you are committed to an inclusive, intersectional approach to the work of justice. But how do you treat black women and women of color in leadership positions? That's the real test. Are you actually able to follow their lead, or do you undermine and question them at every turn? Room is a little quiet. It's a little quiet. That's fine. You undermine because you don't support. You don't risk anything to help folks that have less resources. You don't listen because maybe they don't have the kind of polish that you think they need to have before you listen. And then when, after you do it enough times, I know sisters, I am one, we will come tell you about yourself because you deserve it. And then when we do it, then everyone doe eyes. Why are you so angry? And then, y'all know what comes next? Tears, y'all know it? I got a whole chapter in this book called White Girl Tears. So you do wrong, you undermine, you undercut, and here's the thing that white women really need to know. White women, look, I get it. Compared to white men, you're looking at the way that white men rule the world and you're thinking, well, shit, we don't really have a lot of power. What the hell? That's your main problem. You're looking at white men's version of freedom and you think that that's the thing to aspire to. And one of the things that white women have to do if you're really about this life is recognize that your model of what feminist freedom actually looks like is based on a very bad model and example. Black women don't have this problem because we ain't got no race privilege and we ain't got no gender privilege. And so at the nexus of those two things, our vision of freedom is never about trying to have what white men have. Not in the aggregate. And anytime you meet a sister that want to have what a white man has, she not quite right a lot, right? And so white women don't recognize that the nexus of their oppression is also the limit of their freedom vision. That you understand that you are oppressed because you see yourself next to white men, but you don't recognize that if all you want is what they have, then what you're asking for is to rule the world in the way that white men have. And who wants that? Not black women, not women of color, not anybody with good sense. And I know that's hard for white men to hear, but Trump is the president, so if we're not gonna say it now, when will we say it to you? That something has gone awry in your vision of what freedom means, and this black woman is willing to say it. Okay, so. White women, one of the best pieces of advice I can give you, and it's only gonna be 2 pieces of advice tonight. One of them is stop crying. Stop it. Stop it. Don't do it. When you get called out on your racism, if you have to be like, let me excuse myself, go to the bathroom and suck it up, do not cry. Because when you do, all of the it becomes a moment that is about assuaging your tears and making you feel better, and not about the injustice that you have enacted on somebody else. Now look, I'm cheering for y'all, and I'm cheering for the badass woman of color that was just announced as the new president of the national organization. Leana Wen is an immigrant woman of color who came to the U.S. under harrowing political circumstances and lived here for nearly 15 years before being granted U.S. citizenship. And I like the sister because based on what I've read, she's good and crunk, and I fucks with it really hard. I really like it. I like it a lot. But here's the thing. It's not simply enough to put a symbolic firebrand at the head of your organization. Her political commitments have to exist in the work on the ground everywhere. So one of the things I'm reminded of when I review Kimberly Crenshaw's early work on intersectionality is the way that she foregrounded the struggles of both Black women and Latinas in her thinking about intersectional jeopardy. So she talked very forthrightly in her 1991 article, Demarginalizing the Intersections, about how an undocumented Latina woman, for instance, struggling with domestic violence, might not be able to report her abuse to the police for fear of deportation. That was in 1991. Today, conditions, as we can all agree, are far more dire in this regard than they were 25 years ago. We already know that Kavanaugh made his political stance on abortion known when he tried to keep a 17-year-old immigrant girl facing deportation from accessing an abortion. It's fine to be appalled when Kavanaugh does it, but are we making sure in our reproductive justice work that undocumented people have access to Planned Parenthood facilities in a way that does not put them in jeopardy? Do you have access to advocates for and in undocumented communities who can make sure that services are available to the most vulnerable? What about in trans and gender non-binary communities? What about in Black communities? And yes, you might be doing well, but look, none of us is ever beyond the question. We always deserve the question, how well are we doing? Where can we be doing better? Are you listening to the folks on the ground in these communities? One of the sisters I have to shout out tonight, who I keep up with on Facebook and who I know in these streets, a sister that I admire and that I will hurt you if you don't treat right, is Cherie Scott and her work at Sister Reach. She's a sister who gets it, and she's one you should be listening to. Someone already also shouted out Professor Zandria Robinson, who I've met once and who I deeply respect and admire, whose crunkness really feels, true to my own soul. And local authoress Jamie Hatley, who is a dope and wonderful writer, and you should be partnering with the Center for Southern Literary Arts. Those are sisters you should be checking for and listening to and glad to sit at the feet of. So in Eloquent Rage, I talk quite a bit about the importance of my crew. The fierce band of homegirls I keep around me who tell me when I'm winning and help me not to lose it on people, and who lovingly tell me when I'm wrong. And I talk about a homegirl in college who heard me spouting the falsehood that I didn't need feminism because it was white women shit. Now, I had not read anything to support my theory, and so I'm gonna say to the sisters in the room who struggle with the label, don't step over all the Black women ancestors who gave you feminist thought as a political inheritance because white women don't get it. It doesn't matter. It ain't about them, right? I'm a feminist because Black women taught me my feminism and modeled it for me, and I can find that if I look in 1775 or 1831 or 1892, and I could go on. It's not new. And so it can't be about what white women do. So I hadn't read anything to support my theory, but I had heard somebody say it and it sounded right, so I was running around being raggedy. And one of my homegirls hemmed me up in the dorms. I was a student at Howard, and she was like, I heard you talking real crazy today about feminism. Here, read this book. I'm gonna say that to you. When you out here and your politics is raggedy, find a book and read it. It will help you get right. But it was the model of what I call in Eloquent Rage the homegirl intervention, this loving way that Black women have of telling you to get your shit together. What I know for sure is that Black women have been running around this nation staging homegirl interventions. Maxine Waters is a walking homegirl intervention. The women in Alabama who put Senator Doug Jones in Congress staged a homegirl intervention. Given the way that my local folks go up for Commissioner Tammy Sawyer, I know that that sister is staging all the interventions. Every woman in this room needs a crew of homegirls who root for her and want her to win. And sometimes that means that they will tell you that your shit stinks and you ain't right. Every white woman in this room needs a diverse and intersectional crew of homegirls with whom you can be in community and to whom you can be accountable. But make sure as you find diversity in your community that you aren't raggedy, because the risk for women of color being in community with white women is but we trying, but then y'all do something and it's not only that we pull away, sometimes I think what we won't say is that it feels hurtful. That part of what we want in community is the ability to be vulnerable. And part of what we sometimes can't get with white women, we always wait on that moment when y'all don't do right and where the real you comes out. And so that's why it's hard. But look, it's less hard if we see you as a person who's deeply thinking about it, struggling with it, grappling with it, and trying. What I know about the magnanimity of black women is that if you're even halfway sincere, we'll kick it with you and you might get an invitation to the picnic. Don't bring the potato salad, but you might could get an invitation. If you feel like you have your race politics down pat, I would invite you to reconsider and read some literature on the subject. That was a line from Andre 3000 for my hip hop heads in the room. Also, if you have done your work, gather up another white woman who hasn't. That's my second piece of advice for tonight. Help her to get it together. I will forever keep saying that the thing that baffles me most about woke white women is the ways that they don't feel at all responsible for coming to get their people. Black feminists understand the importance of taking our radical feminist perspectives into our communities to help women who are dealing with raggedy dudes or raggedy preachers or terrible employment options or a cultural profusion of misogyny, also known as black woman hatred. But too often, white women get woke, right? Y'all get conscious. Y'all have your consciousness raised to give you the 1970s version of woke. And then you say, well, all those Republican white ladies who voted for Trump, I mean, they aren't my people. I don't really see them at the gym or... But you see them at church and daycare and the park. And sure, it's hard to organize them and appeal to them, many of them claiming in the name of Jesus that they can't have any better politics. But it's your job to do it anyway. I fight, and there are people in this room who can tell you, I fight with black male preachers all the time, pleading with them to stop preaching death-dealing theology that shames black women from their pulpits. And typically, they be real mad with me about it, and typically, I don't care. But, I mean, because here are the stakes. We watched 2 weeks ago as a pastor took the opportunity at Aretha Franklin's funeral, like we say down in the country, at her fume, y'all know what I'm saying, to shame her reproductive choices and blame black communities for structural ills that we know black folks didn't cause. And this week, there's news of a pastor in Alabama cutting up Nike gear in the pulpit because of his unholy rage. Here's the difference. Woke black folks came and got Jasper Williams for talking crazy at Aretha's funeral. He wasn't the first pastor to be ridiculous, but he is the first pastor in this digital era to catch the wrath of black women writers and thinkers in the public sphere who made it possible to call out his terrible theology, so much so that he had to respond. Now, his response was terrible, but he was confronted with the truth of the death-dealing thing that he did. That's why I'm thankful for local preacher pastors like Dr. Andre Johnson and soon-to-be Dr. Earl Fisher and Reverend Gina M. Stewart, who are about this radical, transformative life. So I would invite black women who are trying to find good churches. It looked like y'all got it on. I mean, y'all gave me hope for the South. I was like, you better come on with radical black Jesus here. Yes, bring it. Because look, black folks everywhere don't have access to a kind of theology that says, not God loves you in spite of your abortion, but does God care about your womb more than God cares about you? That is the question that I think we should be asking, right? I know that's hard for some of y'all to hear, but you're talking to a preacher's kid, so I'm down for the theology debate. Let's do it. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. When black folks act terrible, black feminists feel like, oh shit, we gotta go get our people. Like, how can we help transform the discourse? When white people be tripping, white women, y'all don't do that. Because you haven't recognized that white women in suburbia and the 53% who voted for Trump, if y'all would see them as a population that, one, you're responsible for, and two, that you could organize, if you could shift the thinking of even 1% to 2% of those women, you would radically transform the political landscape in this country overnight. So whenever white folks ask me what they can do, this is always my answer. It isn't go help black people or go amongst black communities and be woke, because who needs that? If you have resources, give those to a black woman and let her figure out where it goes. But what I want you to do is go get your people. Don't let Barbecue Becky and Permit Patty and Pool Patrol Paula be out here making life untenable for black and brown people. See yourself as endued with power from tonight forward to stage homegirl interventions for white women who are out here doing harm as a matter of course. It matters. That everyday organizing and conversation and intervention, it matters. Part of what I'm saying to you is that my personal life is better because of the crew that holds me down. My personal life is better, but my politics are also better. They are richer, they are deeper, they are broader, they are more thoughtful, and they are more just. The black women and women of color who get in your ear and annoy you and tell you to do better, see it as a gift. What I know about being a black woman is that we don't waste our time on folks that we don't think can do better. Women often fail to embrace their, getting there. A core principle of owning your rage is recognizing that everyone is not worth your time or your rage. That is the thing I want to say to sisters. So be mindful of who you're giving it to. And white women, when you are on the receiving end of a sister's rage, be mindful that they're gifting it to you. I know that's hard to hear and counterintuitive, but we don't, look, when Serena said, don't talk to me, that's what black women typically say when they don't think you can change. When they've decided, stop talking, I don't want to hear it. If they still talking to you, that means they still have a little bit of hope about what you can do and what you can make possible. See it as a gift, get your tears together, and listen. I know it's hard, but it's true. So, everybody is not worth your time or your rage, but the struggle we're all engaged in is worth it. And the levels of injustice that make this struggle necessary are rage-inducing. Women often fail to embrace their rage because we are afraid of being called unreasonable and illogical and emotional. But here's the thing, folks are gonna call you that anyway. When you show emotion, they call you illogical. When you show no emotion, they call you a bitch. So, go on and tell them how you feel. Be mad. What difference does it make? Other than that you don't have high blood pressure at the end of the day. That's the difference that it makes. We are afraid that our emotions discredit our struggle, but we don't walk into these rooms with any credit in the first place. So embrace your rage, stop apologizing for it, drill down to the depths of it, and then figure out how to harness it. Let it get you up out of bed, let it help you as you type agendas and make picket signs and knock on doors and counsel women and provide services. Anger, love, and compassion can coexist. Ask any black woman. Ask Serena Williams. Grown-ass women know full well that shit becomes very, very clear when you're angry. Y'all know that, like, rage clarity, where you become really clear? So stop being so afraid of what will happen if you express your rage and start being afraid of what happens if you don't express it. I decided years ago that I would not let my rage kill me. I wouldn't let others weaponize it against me, at least without me getting in the arena and fighting back. I would wield it as one of my own best weapons, and I would recognize that anger is a great tool for helping to build the world we want to see if we use it right. The white men who are driving our political discourse right now are a case study in what anger looks like when we use it wrong. But what we can do is be a case study in what anger looks like if you use it right. Recently, I had the opportunity to read Rebecca Traister's great new forthcoming book, Good and Mad, which I encourage you to pick up. And it struck me that this is what we need right now. Fannie Lou Hamer said a few decades ago, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." I am. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so what I'm hoping now is that we'll all get good and mad. Thank you.